And here we are for another conversation, but this time it's with an individual who has been on this feed before, but hasn't actually specifically been on Genuine Chit-Chat in a normal setting, because you are the guest, or you are the individual on the internet that I've spoken to the most amount of times, but not in the way I normally would. Normally I speak to them on Genuine Chit-Chat and then I guest with them on other stuff. But with you, my friend, because of your podcast, Reckless Rebellion, you and I have been on at least 3 discussion shows together, Andor episode 11, Ahsoka episode 5 more recently, and Mandalorian, it was season 3 episode 4. So we've been talking about Star Wars for well over a year across the internet, and then we spoke about Ahsoka recently, and we started off a nearly 3 hour long conversation on interpretations of an Ahsoka episode and all kinds of stuff that happened in that. We went in such a deep dive in that at the start about another world, like a world between worlds kind of concept, and the soul, and a book you're reading and things. I thought it's just a good time to get you on the show so that we can, although we're united by Star Wars, there's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on in the background to talk about. So just before we delve into that, just to hold for, we're at the edge of the roller coaster, about to tip over the edge, but just before we go down, introduce yourselves to anyone who hasn't listened to those Star Wars conversations. Like, who are you, Thomas? To start off this deep conversation.
What a great question. Who are any of us? That could tip me over the top, but I'll hold on to the e-brake really fast. My name's Thomas Carter Rochester. I am oh my God, what do I do? I'm an actor, an engineer, a podcaster, an ethereal being stuck in a mortal body. I'm a big fan of philosophy. I don't know, theology. I don't know. Don't really know how to describe what I'm a fan of. That deep intellectual, emotional conversations. The why are we alive? Those kind of topics. The ethereal, maybe that's the word I'm thinking of. And the esoteric. I love a good interpretation. So I grew up in Panama City, Florida, and I had a very trying childhood. That worked out well. That sounds better than some other people might put it. So I learned very fast in the world, and my soul has been stuck in my physical body with memories dating back to 6 months old. Some might call it the Tourette's. I call it the physical trauma that comes from birth. It's a very scary time in the 90s. I don't know if you know this. We had like a Bush as a president here in America, but it wasn't that Bush. It was the other Bush. There was too much Bush going on at the time. A lot of Bush in the 90s. I'm looking at you, Bill Clinton. So I grew up with my own kind of viewpoint of the world. And because of my dad fighting that I said I didn't want to go to church. So I wasn't forced to go to church growing up, allowed me to kind of create my own spiritual beliefs, pick and pull from different things, find what feels right. And, I push back on some things that people of various religions say afterlife, because I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. Like, oh, you die and your soul is staying in one place forever. That mathematically doesn't make sense. How does your soul grow from there? Right. So that's kind of how I've always viewed it. And then, of course, people are like, well, when you die, if you don't do good enough things, you go to hell or you go to limbo. And I'm like, I mean, what?
What is good?
Yeah. It's none of us are good in that case. Like, we're all sinners, man. Like, don't get me started on that trope of life. But so I have grown into this very deep viewpoint, I guess. Understanding is a little bit strong of a word, of the world, and done various readings on the soul, afterlife, psychic powers, how everybody is connected, ESP, etc. Nothing like diving into MK Ultra.
Oh yeah, with the acid programs and stuff.
Yeah,
all that crazy stuff. The drug conspiracy. This is not going to delve into a conspiracy podcast, but the two conspiracies I believe in is that when Kennedy got shot, it wasn't just Lee Harvey Oswald involved, and then which is not that's like a very mainstream conspiracy theory, but also the war on drugs is just nonsense. Like the more you delve into it with the whole stuff with like cocaine transporting with Pablo Escobar and a lot of the people from the Central and South Americas, and like all of that kind of stuff, and as you mentioned, the MK Ultra program and LSD and all those things, like America literally just bought the world's LSD to test it on primarily, mentally handicapped individuals and things like that. And it's like all kinds of darkness going in around the drug war. So I'm like, that whole thing, when you find out why cannabis was made illegal, it was because some guy who had a newspaper, I can't remember what his name was, it was all about realizing that hemp was actually so much more valuable and easier to grow, and you could get so much more out of it, and he owned lots of money in paper, so he used his newspaper to like spread a smear campaign. And it's all the, like, when you look into the history of a lot of it, and like crack cocaine and how that was used against a lot of people of color, like all these different things, it's a massive conspiracy. But those depths, which I do want to delve into at some point in this podcast, so maybe I'll hit you up with the kind of depths of the drug war, because that kind of stuff is mental. But going beyond that, I will also apologize to our listeners and our video viewers. I've got a bit of a cold. You may be able to hear the grizzleness in my voice and the disheveled look of me. It's because I'm getting over a cold and I'm knackered. But I've coughed up. I'm pushing through and chewing gum, so sorry if there's mouth noises. But I'll edit them out where I can. But we are going to delve in to some things that Thomas here has touched upon. And it's really just a real deep existential conversation, I suppose, about anything in kind of this realm. It's probably going to be, we'll probably do more of these. I can't imagine that we're going to in an hour and a half or so, we're going to speak about every single concept that's ever existed. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. So may I ask, this is probably a good jumping off point. So for me, myself, I've found this personally, my answer to the question I'm about to ask you would be yes. But do you find that your enjoyment of Star Wars and your enthusiasm for it, I don't know why I said enthusiasm so weirdly, your enthusiasm for it is connected with some of the spiritual beliefs within the Star Wars universe? Like, I've found myself, as I've gotten older, certain concepts within the Force, not necessarily the ability to move things with your mind necessarily, but it's like, well, if you transferred energy throughout the air particles in a certain way, could it be theoretically possible? In theory, but not the human body can generate that kind of thing. Like, that little kind of quirk aside, more so we're all energy, we're all beings of light, we're all connected, it's all just energy at the end of the day. Like, those sort of concepts and that oneness, that's something that I know Star Wars has taken a lot from Buddhism and a lot of other religions. But did you find yourself connected with Star Wars on a deeper level because of those elements? And if so, when you kind of found that, was it early on, or was it kind of later in your enjoyment of Star Wars? Like, do those things connect with you at all?
They absolutely do connect. I've always, who hasn't wanted to just wield the Force just to pull the remote closer to you'd be like, oh, my drink's so far away. Ah, yeah. Or, like throw a lightsaber around your house and pull it back to you like a boomerang. Who doesn't want to do all of those fun things in the safety of their own home? But as I don't really know when it kind of popped in to my head. I guess it really connected the hardest in my 20s after college. There was a lot of stuff that I would think about growing up, and because of society, as a little kid, I was like, oh, it's totally possible. Of course you could do that. And I'm like, but I don't understand how to explain how it's possible. And like you were talking about, we can break it down scientifically all you want, but at the end of the day, everything's vibrations. If you can match the energy, well, it's like flash phasing through a building. You just have to match the exact vibrational frequency to make something slip through the cracks, if you will, because we have nothing but space in between every single atom. We're more space than we are solids. So, and with that in mind, like, it's totally easy. You just have to shift it just ever so slightly to make something like that happen. After my grandma died, she died a week after I graduated college. I ended up just drinking a lot, as one does. And then once I started smoking weed for a couple years to like delve a little deeper into my psyche, I was like, I like randomly just started remembering all these little things that I'd think about as a kid. And I'm like, wow, that's weird that it came back. Like, that's cool. Like, it helped me heal a lot, And then The Force Awakens came out in 2015. And by that point, I'd already started making some connection. I think I'd rewatched everything and was like, wow, okay, so I totally misunderstood Luke's lesson in Return of the Jedi. I remember the line, "Your hate makes you powerful, and your anger gives you strength." And then I played football for 9 years with that mantra in my mind. So I was a very um, dark side user when it came to playing football. Even though I loved playing football, I just harnessed it for the team, if you will. Just like Anakin Skywalker. What a guy, loser. So I ended up like really finding the zone in college, doing more workouts, becoming a trainer, yoga. Once I started taking yoga, I started recognizing things of the meditation side of Star Wars, of the light side, you know. The meditation brings peace, it brings clarity, it calms your nerves. And I could get into all the science that I've researched when it comes to your breath and your nervous system and your, you know, the way that you're able to calm yourself down with exhaling more than inhaling. And people get that, I think, backwards sometimes. It's like, and it's like, no, you got to do it the other ways. And it has a total reversing effect to your nervous system. The inhale is pumping on the gas, and the exhale is pumping on the brake for your nervous system. Is the best way it's been explained to me. So coming out of that, I've decided to look more into the esoteric things, and I came across a book called The Source Field Investigations. And I was just reading it. I was like, you know, like at the time, if I'm not mistaken, I was trying to find a book on vibrational frequencies to try and to like work on a theory for time travel, because I'd thought about it. I had a few dreams that it was all possible. All you had to do was hit the right vibrational frequency to break through the time-space barrier and all that. And I found the book called The Source Field Investigations. And one of the many things it said in there is like the Akashic Records, this, that, the other, this, that, like list off all these different things. And the Akashic Records I learned from Ancient Aliens, of course. They talked about that, how there's this infinite stream of information flying in from space at all times through radiation, vibrational frequencies, etc. And that the astrology back in the day was really meant to measure to define the energy that's coming in and out of the world at a certain point. And in this book, it kind of ties that in with the Mayan calendar, what 26,000 years actually stands for. And in it, you know, in the little back thing of the book, it was talking about ways to view what the source field is and what you could call it. And one of the things was like the Force from Star Wars. And I was like, well, you've piqued my interest officially. Like I was already interested, but I was like, well, now you have the nerd in me, like hooked to learn how to use the Force. And the more I read about that book, like read in that book, it just opened my mind to something totally insane. Like one of my favorite little anecdotes is the guy who made the lie detector test, the polygraph test, excuse me. He had it hooked up. I don't remember how he got to this, but he had like did something and saw a reaction. He was confused. So he was like, well, let me hook it up to this plant and see what happens if I decide to break it. Right. Because he noticed, I don't remember what it was hooked up to, but he saw a similar correlation of like a spiked heart rate in the vibrations that it was registering. So he hooked it up to a plant, started tearing it. And as soon as he would tear it, it would spike. And then he's like, So he tried a bunch of different things, including eggs. He would hook it up to eggs on the counter. And eventually he got to this point. And he would take an egg and put it in the boiling water. And as soon as hit the boiling water, the ones on the counter would panic. In essence, with the vibrational frequency. But if he would thank it and give it love and gratitude before putting it into the water, it would be less. So it's like, oh, we are connected to this thing that is quote unquote inanimate, even though it came from a living being. And it is energy. If you want to say, oh, well, food is not it, what energy is it going to give you? I don't know, dummy, like the kind that fuels the body, that kind of energy. And so we're all connected in that way. And it brought me into and immediately I'm like, we are one with the Force. All things are connected through the Force. And he goes to the lengths of having someone spit in a jar. And then he has the ability to like some electrodes and he plugs it in. And because he's done DNA tests by this point of various types, like, okay, this plug some electrodes in and they synchronize watches. And then dude flies all the way to San Diego, and the polygraph guy measures, we'll call him Guy A because I don't remember the names. Guy A measures the timestamps where stuff spiked. And then he talked to him after he got home, and he's like, all right, so this time what happened? He goes, oh, my baggage was missing on the carousel and they had to go find it really quick, and I was almost late for my flight. And I got stuck in traffic on the tram because it almost broke down. Like all these little things that would express stress. And what it comes down to is about 24 to 72 hours, our DNA is still energetically, we got there, dyslexia, energetically connected to our body. So if I were to spit in a jar, that spit would be connected to me on an energetic frequency for up to 24 hours, right? Or maybe I'm saying up to 24. I think that's what it was, but he might have extended it in the book. I should reread it because I don't remember the exact numbers, and my OCD brain doesn't like that. So,
well, I like the concept there, and I want to add in sort of. I've never heard that concept before, and it's interesting in that individual. I think I'd need more testing to fully get on board with everything that has been said there. However, there is a part of me that's like, well, I know for a fact that living cells have align with something called the circadian rhythm, and our bodies have got that. And I wonder, like, if you spit, the amount of bacteria that is on your body, and the whole concept of what makes you, because there's like trillions of bacteria, like that part of you, including inside your gut, and your gut is part of and is connected to the enteric nervous system, which literally affects your body and your moods as much as your brain does. And so it's like what you're eating and things. That's why it's a huge whole thing, but it's like all these different bacteria and things on your skin, the skin biome, and all your gut biome and all these things, you're made up of just billions and trillions of cells. And it's like these cells are connected because they make you, the skin cells know to make skin cells, I know stem cells play a sort of a part in certain elements. But when the building blocks of your body are formulated, it's like, bones make blood, and then that goes through this, and things slowly just heal themselves, and everything's kind of connected to you. And it's like, well, if you spat some amount of because you can spit, and they can use that in like tests, can't they? In the medical tests, they can use what you spit to test if you're ill or things like that, because there's bacteria that you've spat in there. So it's like, in theory, so if there's enough bacteria in your spit that you've spat out that was homogenized, I think, created in your system, then who's to say it wouldn't be able to have some degree of connection? I think the distance would be a part of it that is the part that's hardest for me to believe, in a sense of, if he was in the same room and he spat in a jar and they did something, then I'd be like, okay, there's a closeness there. How far it goes, I think I would need more testing on that. But the ground level of the idea that kind of delves into what makes you, and then your cells, how do they operate? They're connected to your brain in some ways, but the saliva in your mouth isn't connected to your brain. It's like refuse. It's like the skin cells that come off you, in a sense. There's like, what is it that is you in itself, I suppose? And I imagine that the question that Star Wars says is the Force, so you're all everything, there's the soul is a concept. I quite like the idea we're all just energy beings, but in just meat wagons. Yeah. It's just a thing where, and it's like your memories and who you are just electrical signals. They're just made out of electricity and energy in your brain. That's what's powering you. So it's like, you are made from electricity. You are made from energy. When you eat things, it's got a different type of dormant energy in that. These inanimate things could be connected to other things because they've come from that thing. And then when you start zooming out, like if a big, like a magnifying glass, a microscope rather, zooming out and things, you go, okay, well, we all came from the earth. All of the humans on earth, they are grown from humans on earth who are breathing in earth's air, who are eating earth's food, meat or greens and, various other things in between. And it's like, you have been made on this thing. So we are all, in a sense, organisms connected to the earth. So if the earth can feel something, could we then feel something? And I know there's theories about that. And then you delve deeper into that, and it's like, well, the earth is made from the same stuff the rest of our solar system is. And then you zoom out again, and it's like, well, all the solar system's made out of everything else. And you kind of do the Big Bang kind of, if one subscribes to that main theory, which I do, of just we're all one kind of point that's microscopically small, and then it just, it happened, and then it all happens, and then I think it gets to the end, and then it stops, and then just redoes it all again. It kind of, absorbs it all back in and then just starts again. It's just this infinite loop. But if I rewind it all the way back just to the soul and that concept, because you mentioned about your sort of your spirituality and your sort of religious, not quite aversions in some ways, but you were intrigued by them, but you didn't sort of delve fully into any one. And I myself, I went to a Catholic primary school, so that'd be year or grade, it's kindergarten to like 6, I'd say. So I left around when I was 10, 11 years old, I think. I was Catholic. My parents, neither of them are especially religious. And so I did that, and it made me have lots of questions about religion, and it left a bad taste in my mouth for lots of different reasons. It was no like abuse or anything from me. It was just like I asked questions and I'd be like shut down quite a lot. And I wanted to try the little bits of bread cracker thing and try some of the wine, but they wouldn't let me unless I did my first Holy Communion to try and push me into the religion. It's things like that which I wasn't a fan of when I kind of came out and I was asking a lot of questions and things. So I then learned about some of the horrors that have been caused by religion in the world over the millennia, and that kind of made me withdraw a lot from it. And then only in my 20s, sort of around the time my dad got ill and later passed away, I then delved into things. I too was consuming intoxicants, shall we say, to kind of deal with the loss of my dad 10 years ago, a variety of them. And in that, I did find, before that, I was kind of opening the door in a way to kind of learning more about, being more open to things. My dad wasn't religious, but he always thought he had a guardian angel. He always described him as an Indian man who was just there at certain major points in his life. And there's like certain weird things that happened after my dad died that I can't really explain, that are really peculiar things. I think I've said in the podcast before. So people, if veteran listeners will know. But like, I delved into that realm and I kind of then started dabbling more into religion a bit more. I was more intrigued by that, and that's what I've kind of been doing with my podcast. So with you and yourself, how your kind of connection with religion and connecting with spirituality and the soul as a kind of core middle idea, what do you think about all that?
That's a hard question because because there's like 3 separate things. I guess really I went from inside out is how I've always done it. As a natural introvert, I gained my energy from taking care of me. I had to learn early on that only I can take care of me. Did it stick right away? No, I'm just learning what self-care actually is, and it's not just like a fancy term that everyone told me to do for years. I just never understood what it was. Until I was like 27. And then I was like, okay, well, this is self-care. And then I'm like, as I got older, I'm like, that's actually sabotage. You're just watching TV instead of doing the dishes, you loser. So as I've gotten a little bit older since then, it's only been like 5 years. It's grown to understand what self-care is. So inside out, Source Field really started me. That book had another book called The Synchronicity Key. And in that, I've always had prophetic visions, prophetic dreams, visions, etc. In that book, it talks about the pineal gland, and that the pineal gland is theorized to be what holds the soul. And people think that it's too small to hold the soul. And I would say, based on some of my readings, that it's they say we only use 10% of our brains. I think it's more because we only use like 10% of our souls, or 10% of our souls on Earth. So it's a concept that I think slightly changed.
I think that is a myth, the 10% brain thing, just to interject. That sort of concept of you only using 10% of your brain. I think it's normally like 80 or 90% most of the time. But I do, there are parts of the brain that I use not as much, I will say. And I've heard about the pineal gland as well, to be honest. So sorry to railroad you for that, but sorry, continue.
Good. So they talk about the soul, legitimately, it's only part of our soul comes to Earth in our body. The rest of it's out in the ethereal world, which is why sometimes you just have like an intuition, like, I got to go do this. Like, I need to not drive down this road today because something bad might happen. And then you find out there was a wreck there, right? Keeping it very simple. Not the complex shit I've had where I've gone through multiple past lives and had horrible tragedies happen. It's traumatic. So once I kind of learned about the pineal gland and the soul and dove more into meditation and trying to connect with the earth and the world around me and the people, Then I kind of opened myself up because I wasn't spiritual. I wasn't religious. I opened myself up to spirituality. Um, and I just pulled from everything. If it felt right, I pulled it in. And if it felt wrong, I was like, no, that doesn't make sense on a spiritual level. Like, why would that be a thing? Like, it didn't make sense. And really found karma to be the big thing. One of the things that the book talked about too is that I don't know if this is 100% true. I'm not a theologist. I don't know how to verify this information. In like 550 AD, Constantine the First kicked out two cardinals from the I guess it would have been Catholics. I don't know. Or maybe it was just early Christianity. Anyways, he kicked out two cardinals, changed the rules, pulled in two guys, and started politicizing religion, the Christianity religion. And allegedly at that point forward was the creation of hell. So that, because remind you, this is like the fall of the Roman Empire, like 100 years away from the official collapse or something, maybe 200. The official collapse, like we're done, we're disbanded. These are breaking up into different regions like the USSR did back in 1991, 1990, 89, one of those years. I wasn't alive. So once that happened, they were going down that hill. They wanted to create the fear of God instead of the fear of your government. Because if you fear the government, you can fight back. But if you fear God, you can't fight back. And that's kind of something that they talked about in this book. And I was like, that's really interesting. They say the fires of hell. And they's like, but in older text, it was the fires of the soul or something, which is really karmic debt. It was like a lot of the you will go to hell talk was really just all about karmic debt. Don't know if that's true. Never really read all of the Bible. I read the book of Revelations. It was very revealing, to say the least. And recently I decided to talk to a friend of mine, and I've accepted Jesus into my heart, but I don't subscribe specifically to just Christianity, because it's more of I believe in one God, one creator. I don't like to say it's a male or female, a him or her. It's the creator. It's the force. It's the universe. There's been a lot of different words I've attributed to quote unquote God, whatever you want to. And I'm trying to focus on utilizing one term. I still struggle. I'll be like, thank you, universe. Thank you, force. Thank you, Yahweh, out of nowhere. And I'm like, why did I use the Yahweh? I'm not even like, that's left field, sir. But I've accepted, Jesus into my heart and trying to change it because, like, it's one of those things of the love of the creator is what we're made from, right? That's one of the theories out there is that the creator sent love down onto earth, and because of the soil of the earth, love and the soil made us. There's a lot of different versions of that kind of creationist theory dating back to like humans were made of clay from the Greeks and shit like that. So when I zoom in to the internal, the soul, it's like really small, really microscopic. And then it's like, okay, go even smaller and then go into the brainwaves, the electricity that you're talking about. Then you look at the synapses. Well, if you zoom out far enough into the universe, as far as we've mapped it out, looks like what? A brain synapse. So perhaps we're just one of those tiny little molecular bacteria inside of a greater, larger being that we can't even fucking fathom. And inside of us is another living, breathing entity on a molecule that just happens to be a planet. And that's like that's one of those things where people are like, going back to, I think you asked if we're all one God, like we're all the same being that's been on earth and we're all just put in at different points in our soul's life. That concept I first heard listening to Logic's album, Everybody. Actually, highly recommend it. It is an incredibly existential album. I listened to it at a very existential time while reading these books and diving into my soul and the spirituality. It's one of those things where it's like, oh no, I created this for you. Like, you are every human being that has ever or will ever exist. Like, that's one of the keys that he put into that book. I don't know where, or book, excuse me, album. Don't know where he got that concept. But when I heard that, I was like, that makes a lot of sense, because if we are all of that, then it's likely that we're all the same being that is the brain synapse that is our mapped out universe. And everyone talks about the microscopic and the macroscopic. Well, if you look at the solar system or space itself, it's just atoms. It's just molecules. And as a science guy, I've always loved science. I love molecules. So I don't know if that answered your question in any way, shape, or form.
No, it did very well, and it leads me on to being able to say other things I wanted to mention, which was, are we all God? I threw that out there early on. I think I spoke before we pressed record. I kind of ran through a couple of bullet points of just key things of interest. The idea of us all being God. I'm not saying I was the first person to come up with this, but I have thought about this independently, at least to my knowledge. I may have been told this. Someone might know me and may have told me when I was 12 and I haven't remembered it. But the idea that, I go through into things in a scientific perspective, because of my jarring relationship with Christianity / Catholicism when I was younger. And then I learned about the holy wars, atrocities, and lots of these other things. And I studied religious studies in college as well. When I learned about a lot of the restrictive things and elements I didn't like about religion, that kind of made me, as I said, a bit jaded towards religion. And I became like a proper atheist. And I would just say, when you die, nothing happens. That's it, done, easy. And the more I've looked into it, when you actually delve deeper into the scientific side of things, that's when it gets a bit harder. Because the key thing that everyone's heard this before quoted, but it's energy is never lost, it's only ever redirected. You can't destroy energy, it just gets converted to something else. So that concept, just without thinking about anything else, you just think about that one concept, which is one of the core concepts of how we understand physics. So literally, that's one of the core building blocks of rules of physics. And once you understand that, it's like, well, we are all made from each other, and it's everything that exists is all made from the same thing. And you delve deeper into that, you talk about atoms and, how suns work and how energy actually works and the transference of all that stuff. But like my dad used to say when we were younger, when I was younger, he was like, we all kind of have a part of us that is Mozart, because he died so long ago and he just got eaten into the ground and by the animals, the bugs ate him and then the birds ate the bugs and then and he's like, well, Mozart, his atoms that were him is just in the air. It's become one with the earth. It was, hundreds of years ago. And it's like, when you think about even other people in history, it's like eventually they just, at least a part of them would be in some way in the air. It's just, a bird is going to eat a worm at some point, or an animal is going to eat an insect at some point that has eaten the corpse or the decaying matter of a dead person of interest in the world. Or a plant is going to grow out of that, and then something is going to eat something from the plant or eat the plant itself. Like, eventually over time, something is going to consume it and it's going to spread. And if you think about that concept with everything, it all shows that we're all connected in that way. So then I was thinking about the idea of God, and I believe that the entirety of nature, I don't believe there's one creator pulling the strings, because I think that everything in nature is even, the circle of life, again, I bring it back, really simple stuff we learned in, like, when we were really young in school. Trees grow, then they die, the mulch, gives food for the creature at the bottom, etc., grows more, and it's just a cycle. And you look through that of everything on Earth that works, and everything in, like, solar systems and theories on the universe, it's all just use up loads and loads of energy and eventually just stop and die, and then other stuff kind of consume that and turn that into energy, and it just does that cyclically. And I think there being a being outside of that doesn't, in my mind, make that last equation balance. And so I think, kind of in line with what you've said, which is I've heard about the galaxy looking like brain cells, but I've not made that connection specifically, of just all of us are made from the same being, and all of our collective consciousnesses together, that's what God actually is. That's the whole, that all of our consciousnesses feed into something, because in a really, really visual, I try and explain this in different ways for the different kind of learners, but like a very visual way I think of this is that God is just kind of the universe in a way, with a spotlight in a sense, kind of, or a whole billions of spotlights, trillions. And every human, whatever they're looking at on Earth, is what God can see through us. And so every experience that we're having, every person we're talking to, every single anything you're even looking at and your brain is processing, all of that is being fed into this other thing that's made from all of us, and is just feeding in experience and life. And that's kind of all existence is. It's just kind of having your perspective on whatever's kind of in front of you in a way. You can just decide what goes there. And that just kind of concept of us all being connected and we are the God. And then when we die, the matter that made us, the fragment of the consciousness, just gets put in something else. And there's just this infinite number of consciousnesses that can kind of get made. Some are trees, some are dogs, some are us, that kind of thing.
It's almost like you read this book called Journey of Souls, because that's one of the things they do talk about is, every soul that exists, because what they talk about is the soul can't die.
Mm-hmm.
The body dies, but the energy of the soul cannot die. Because it can't be created or destroyed, at least in how we understand physics, but it was created from another being, right? In the way that our bodies were created from other beings.
Parents.
And so it's just kind of, parents. So it kind of comes to this, eventually the tippy top, the creator, the God, however you want to frame it. And the reason they created us was to learn more about themselves. And I'm trying to remember if the book mentions spread love, but that could just be me projecting that onto there. And so in the book, he puts people into super hypnosis or super conscious states through hypnosis, and is able to take them far enough back between, he used to do past life regressions. And then one day he got them into a point where they're talking about, oh yeah, I'm like falling to earth. He's like, what do you mean? Oh, is this a dream? He's like, no, this is before I was born into this body. And he's like, whoa. And so that started his research. And it comes down to, he would always ask questions, well, like, how can the creator be all knowing, but still learning from you? And they said, well, all knowledge, there's an infinite amount of knowledge on earth alone. So how can one being ever consume all that knowledge? And every planet and every universe, every planet in the universe and the solar system, etc. How can one being know all of that without having people out there learning it? Right? It's like, best way to describe it is delegated us down to learn all of these different things through experience, so it could learn about itself more in the same way that we do things. We go on experiences, trips, do hard things to learn about ourselves. That is us helping the creator learn. And so that is the energy transference. They're not like pulling strings. They're there like, all right, I made you. I need you to teach me. Type of thing. Like, the student becomes the master type thing is the kind of how I always attribute it. And that's the cyclical nature there. It teaches us things from its knowledge and experience. And then when we have knowledge and experience, we turn around and go back to our village in the hero's journey of our lives and go back to our village and give our wisdom out. And then it starts a new journey. And that's kind of how it is looked upon. And our souls, when the body dies, it goes back to this life between lives where it kind of does the same thing. It assesses, the soul learns more from this life and how it compares to the past lives, right? And then has to get to a point of acceptance and growth. There was another thing you said that I really wanted to touch upon, and I'm like blanking on it right now because it was going to tie into all of that good stuff. Ah, man, that's what happens when you go deep.
When the perception of like trying to experience the perception of everything as well as the knowledge of everything.
Exactly. Right. So, and that always, that specific thing is tied into, I'm trying to remember, it might be a Christian thing. Because again, I'm not super religious. And it's like God's eyes are always like, you see through God's eyes, or God sees through our eyes or something. And then if you do things right, you can see things through God's eyes. And it comes down to, are you able to put aside your human form and go to your spiritual form? And we're all one God. That's what it was. So we're all, it's the children of God thing. And, we're all sons and daughters of God. That's what Christianity always says. I'm pretty sure other religions have some kind of form of that And so we are literally, our soul is created from a fragment of the highest soul above us that is learning about itself through us. And when we get to a certain level, let me put it in Christianity terms. There's God, and then he's got his angels, right? And then those angels work miracles and magics. There was Jesus, and there were his disciples. Jesus worked the magic, and the disciples helped spread the message of love and forgiveness. What our souls are doing is growing up those levels. Like, we're the disciples, right, on earth. We go into the afterlife. We have the ability to become a mentor and guide other souls to being. Eventually, slowly climb up, various levels, unknown amount. And they talk about creating universes, creating other living beings as a soul. So, I'm sorry, not other universes, other worlds. And it might be a small, tiny little planet. And like, you'd make mini solar systems because you don't have enough energy to craft a full-size solar system. To kind of give you an idea of how much climbing you do, there's like 7 levels that the guys mapped out, quote unquote. And he's like, and after that, I have no idea what they do because none of them are on Earth. I can't talk to those souls because they've evolved past the point of incarnation in a 3rd dimensional world, and they live on a plane that we can't even fathom. I like to call it the 4th dimensional plane, where they are literally beings of light that travels through probably Einstein-Rosen bridges, because time is not a boundary to them like it is here on Earth. Mm-hmm. And so as you keep climbing, what are you doing? You're learning and you're growing, and then you teach that forward. And basically what you're doing is now you're teaching other souls how to do the same thing and experience something in a different way. Example, I like to use the football analogy, American or footy. You go to a game, how many people are in that stadium? Could be 100,000. Each and every one of you have a different visual perspective. You have someone who's sitting right next to you. Very similar, but the degree of difference is, I'd call a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a degree. So it might be 0.00025 degrees angled viewpoint down. Other side of the stadium has a 180 degree viewpoint difference. Our emotions color the viewpoint as well and color our perspective. So we can all watch the exact same game, but we can have vastly different experiences from the game, even though the factual information of the statistics and what happened in the game, some of it is very much debated. That's why we don't like zebras. Not the species, just the jobs. Just to be clear out there, I don't hate the species of zebras.
Referees.
I do hate the referee zebras, though. It's just one of those things that I'll never get past as a competitor. So that game is a beautiful microscopic view of the universe itself. And you could say that the stadium itself is God in this example, where it is experiencing this game through hundreds of thousands of perspectives. The people on the field, the people in the stands, the people working at the stadium, the security guards, the parking people outside. It's a tiny microscopic universe. And everything that I've read, when you extrapolate it up, that's basically what life is. Mm-hmm. Except it's a little less competitive as far as I've understood.
And you know what's funny and quite messed up about that thought is that I don't necessarily disagree or agree with that line of thinking. But what's entertaining is that you could just argue that's actually an artificial intelligence, and that's evidence of simulation theory, which is a theory that I think is always fun to throw in here, just on the basis that it could be real, but if it is real, it makes no difference to my life, so it's not as fun. It's one of those it's kind of like, oh, is it or isn't it? It makes no difference if it is or isn't. There's not like a real... I feel like with simulation theory, there's not far you can go with it. It's almost like, no, this is kind of here's the theory, and that's almost it. Whereas I think with a lot of the other philosophical and existential theories, there's more like wiggle room to have your own sort of interpretation of it. I suppose you can figure out who is putting the simulation together and those kind of things. But it was just funny when you were describing that. I was like, yeah, that does sound like a super being, but who's to say it was there's that idea you said that it could be just another person and it's just a microscopic thing in their brain and you go subatomic and it kind of repeats itself, or it could be a giant being that we don't understand. I think there's one, I think is it Discworld, where they're on the back of a giant space turtle. I don't know if that is Discworld or if that's something else, but there's like a universe on the back of a giant turtle in space.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's similar to the this is from a show, What We Do in the Shadows. A vampire who grew up in Alcanodar talks about the giant world turtle, and we're all living on the back of a turtle. And it's very similar to that.
Yeah, I think that's that giant world turtle is that's the joke, because it's also in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. There's a joke about it in there as well. But with the idea of there being a god and stuff, it's like my issue with it has always been the issues and the constrictions that come along with it because of the doctrine. Not necessarily there's some sort of being, but it's when it's always like it's God's plan, or it's like God has decided to do this, or God has decided not to do that. Now, I think there is a benefit to praying in the same sense of when you write a gratitude journal, when you meditate and use certain practices while meditating. I don't use these practices when I meditate, but I use just purely breathing exercises and things. But the idea of once you vocalize what it is that you want in the world, it makes it easier to attain, because you can kind of, instead of being this strange kind of ambiguous thought in your mind that's not something concise that's easy to think about, you can't really grasp it when it's this just blob of thought. When you actually say it because you pray or you do some other sort of form of vocal and spiritual exercise, it makes you realize it. So I'm like, I don't necessarily believe there is a God in that sense, but I think that there are benefits to believing in certain elements of that. But for me, what I've kind of done, I think, is similar to yourself. I have extracted my own elements of my own lifestyle. Like I meditate. That's because scientifically, you look at it, as you've said, anyone just look at Wim Hof and you'll know that's it's hitting the iceberg, but he's just, he's like a world record holder on all kinds of different stuff. World record for like swimming underwater. He trains. There's a film, I can't remember what it was, but he's training people to do breathing exercises so they can hold their breath underwater for like way longer than normal people can. I think normal is like a minute or two, and like he can train you just quite quickly to easily do it for like 5 or 6, no problem, or train you for longer and you can do it for a bit longer than that. And it's like it's just a scientific guy. Check him out if you haven't already. But like those concepts, meditation, feeling connected with the universe. One thing I quite like to do when I meditate is I lay down personally when I meditate. I do breathing exercises, slow breathe in for as long as I can, and then slow exhale for as long as I can. And I try and visualize the air particles going into my nose, because I breathe in through my nose, and filling my lungs and I think vacuole sacs, I think they're called, within your lungs, and all those filling up. And then when I exhale, the carbon dioxide primarily being breathed out and that kind of thing. And I just visually try and do that. Sometimes I do it with different colors going in, like a big arrow, like I think I remember from school books and things, like diagrams, and just slowly doing that. And then thoughts come in, and I kind of sometimes categorize them, and then I visualize me blowing or brushing with a hand, it's almost like it was written in chalk, and it just dusts away. And I just think, oh, that wasn't a pleasant thought. Oh yeah, that's a nice thought. Oh, I'm getting distracted by thinking about Star Wars again. Move that along. And I just focus back on the breathing each time I think about something else. And I do it for a period of time. And to clarify, when I'm sober, I do this for a period of time. And if you do it for long enough, and you do it in the right frame of mind to a degree, you have to be, certain times you'll have and you won't be able to meditate as well as you normally can. But if you're quite calm and things and you're not too tired, you can do it in a sense where you start to lose the feeling of where your skin ends and where the rest of the world is, essentially. If you move, you have to keep completely still, which is one of the hardest parts when you first start meditating, because your legs want to twitch and your hands want to move. But if you keep dead still, I find I lay down and I feel that the connection of what you can feel, almost the energy almost kind of coming off you. And part of it is just that feeling the heat, because one of our senses is feeling temperature. It's like feeling the heat come off you. But heat is a form of energy. So it's like when you are literally getting colder, when you have your hands out in the open and you can feel the warmth coming off them, that is literally just energy coming off of your skin and going off. So you're literally dissipating energy all the time. So I find that when you meditate, you can kind of hyper-focus on parts of your body and kind of feel things a bit more, because you're just shutting down, a lot of other senses in a way, kind of diverting brain power in some ways, while the breathing things, change parts of you chemically. And then you feel the connectivity with the universe just on that basis. Again, completely sober, you feel this. And that again kind of furthers into the connectivity, I find. So I want to know, like, what's your experience with meditation? Like, you mentioned it before. How do you do it, if you don't mind sharing? And how do you feel when you kind of do it as well?
I don't know. I don't know if I have a consistent way of doing it. I used to put on meditation music and lay down. I like meditating outside when I can to absorb the sun, because that vitamin D is nice. And there's a theory out there that through the sun's radiation is information that you can absorb physically and mentally. I also stared at the sun for like a lot when I was a child because everyone told me not to do it, and like a contrarian little shit, I did it anyway. But when I look back, like my memory of that is just like watching the sun rays come into my eyes, and it's like ones and zeros, like the fucking Matrix, just like going right. It's like reverse Star Wars scroll, but into my eyes with ones and zeros is how I have that imagery in my head. And this was years before I read into the sun brings you energy type of shit. So I would do that for a little while. And there's been different types. Like if you go to YouTube, first off, the University of YouTube is amazing for everything. I like to I go off my feeling, I trust in the force, if you will. And I'll look up different YouTube, different meditation musics. There are the 9 solfeggio frequencies. There are alpha, the brainwave frequencies. There's a pineal gland frequency. I actually listen to that every night when I'm asleep. I found that without that kind of music, my sleep is significantly decreased. And I've been doing this since 2018. Wow. So I have enough experience to be like, yep, I slept shitty. What happened? Oh, my iPad died in the middle of the night. Bummer. My iPad hours are ridiculous for screen time. They're just skewed for sleep. So that's one thing I've done. And then there's pineal gland frequencies, though. I will say I give a big shout out to that. They are game changers. That actually, if I'm exhausted and I don't nap. I have ADHD, Tourette's, OCD, so my brain never really shuts off without my medication. If I am at the point where like I'm trying to shut down and I can't in the middle of the day because I've just, I haven't slept enough, I throw on a pineal gland frequency and I'll lay down and I will actually get to a point of rest where, like you're talking about, I can't feel my body. I feel nothing. There's the earth and I'm one with the earth and the earth is with me type of energy. That's exactly how I feel. Then sometimes I have to be moving to meditate. I have to do yoga. I have to do animal flow. I have to just loosen the body because it's so tight and tense. And that is just me breathing. And when I work out, I love, if I'm in the right mindset, of course, I love to visualize the muscle fibers engaging. And I love to feel the difference between when my joints are hurting on like one rep, my shoulder might hurt. And then I'll imagine the muscles taking on the pressure from my shoulders and the next rep will hurt less. Right. And I've been doing that for years for the same reasons. Then sometimes I just do Wim Hof. Right. I've done Wim Hof breathing stuff. First thing in the morning is amazing. I love when you said tip of the iceberg because dude's all about the ice plunge. So, I vary from time to time on what I do. Lately, my most recent methods is I've bounced back and forth. Lately, I've been a little bit too on the go when I wake up. So for a while, I was laying down and I was going through 3 10-minute meditations of affirmations. And I would lay there and I would do my best not to think, because that's the key for meditation that I found is just don't think about anything specific to the point that you get latched onto it. I love the swiping away the chalk. I, in my mind, delete it like I'm on a phone. I just swipe right, or I guess that'd be swipe left. And that's been very helpful for me, especially when it's an intrusive thought, because I have my OCD is pure obsessive thoughts. There's no main physical compulsions. Most of that comes from my ADHD. Be like, did I lock the door? Okay, cool. But wait, did I lock my car? Wait, did I lock my car? Did I lock my car? Bam, 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 bam. Okay. Happens to me all the time. Saw a great reel on Instagram about ADHD people forgetting stuff at the house. And I felt very seen and also attacked. Um, so I do my best to sit, focus on my breath. That's the key is hit the breath. Doing various breathing techniques. It might be Wim Hof one day. It might be um, a version of box breathing. Box breathing is what the Navy SEALs use and firefighters for stress relief. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. I've got massive lungs. Like my lung capacity has always been pretty high as a kid. Couldn't tell you why. Just born with it. Blessed. And I, as a kid, could hold my breath for 45 seconds to a minute. When I started doing Wim Hof, you start out holding your breath for 60 seconds. Then the next is Wim Hof videos on YouTube. There's beginners, there's beginner slow, there's intermediate. I don't know if he has an advanced. I like to do the beginner slow because it's shorter technically. And I'm always pressed on time in the morning. So I do the first one, it's 60 seconds. You can hold it longer if you choose. More often than not, by that point, I'm ready to go. Then there's the second one of 90 seconds. The third one is 90 seconds. That third one, I often like to just hold it for as long as I can and not listen, not think. And visualization is the key for me on meditation. I really love that you have your different ways. There was one day I was like, I don't know, I woke up emotional, like in a weird way. I had a weird dream that was really fucking with me. And I could tell I was going to have a little bit of a rough day if I didn't stop that right then and there. So I laid down and I don't remember if I was listening to an affirmation video or not, but there was a thought that like I am nothing without the earth. I am nothing if I don't live on earth. If I didn't live on earth, how could I exist? My body, my soul might exist, but my body would be different. So it would change my experience because of the pain I've been through. It creates this. So I am one with the earth. I'm meant to serve the earth. I'm meant to be here and serve the people. That is the whole purpose of my soul coming to earth. And it was just like flowing in, just that was a stream of consciousness thought. And I don't know. I lost track of time. It was one of those things where time just failed to exist. And all of a sudden it was like 20, 30 minutes later and I get up and I just start writing my daily affirmations because that's a part of my daily ritual. And it was one of the more transformative meditations I've had. And I've had some crazy experiences. I've dripped into past lives. I've experienced myself dying multiple lives in a row. It was a very scary thing. And I've had visions of people close to me going through tumultuous times, I think is the best way to put it, only to find out a day or so later that like, oh yeah, that actually happened. Like something like that happened to them. It just wasn't exact. It's never specific. It's like they talk about in Star Wars, visions of the future. Careful you must be. Hard to interpret they are. And I think that's a very true statement. And the key for me with meditation is it has helped take control of my Tourette's, whereas I didn't realize how out of control it was until I started meditating more specifically. And the more that I can calm the mind, because as you can hear, dear podcast listener, I'm always all over the place. I am a living tangent. And the more that my mind calms down, I'm not a tangent. I'm not anything. And there's nothing more free than realizing we're not anything because nothing is anything. And you want to talk about simulation theory? I mean, I say Earth is a simulation. Life is a simulation. All of it is. And it's not bad if it is, because it's not like, oh, it's a program. It's designed like it's never going to change. You are set on this one path and it'll always be that. It's not how it is. It's the same way as if you play a video game. You have the same amount of choices in a video game that you do in real life. Playing GTA, You can be a good citizen. You can drive, or you can be a fuckhead and go kill everybody. Like, and you have everything in between that spectrum, and that's what life is. I mean, GTA is a little bit geared more towards the dark side of reality, I would say. But then you have stuff like The Sims, right? And you can do all those same things. You have those farming games on YouTube. They're not that different from what we do. And what we are doing could just be, and I will argue this in a second, we could just be a video game with someone else at the controller. And like I've been talking about with the soul is at the controller, but sometimes we, the body inside the game, are too powerful for the soul. Powerful's maybe, let me rephrase that. We're too chaotic for the soul to get through to our brain to send the messages we need. That's why some people say, oh, they can hear the voice of God. They might. They might be hearing the voice of God through their soul, who's telling them what to do. They might be hearing the voice of their guardian angel. They might be hearing the voice of the future and the past. There's a lot of different theories. They could just be receiving information from space itself. Whatever you want to call it, sometimes we're too chaotic to be able to do that. It's like when you're in a bad mood and all of a sudden you just want to fight something, you can't figure out why, and then someone says, hey man, calm down, and you're just like, you telling me to calm down? It's just like, you're not in a place to listen to another being. So in the same way, like your soul can't speak to you, God can't speak to you because you're closed off. The animal instincts have taken over. And in video games, sometimes the programming takes over and you get put into a cutscene that you can't get out of. And I can't believe I just thought of that on the spot. Actually, I need to write that one down. It's a great explanation to the times that we're just like, why is this happening to me? Well, sometimes things are fated to exist, in my opinion. You have to be put through certain trials and tribulations to grow. And sometimes the same things happen over and over because we don't learn and don't grow. And that, I don't know if is even a soul thing or just a life thing on a third dimensional incarnation thing. You know, you are doomed. What is it? If you don't learn from the past, you are doomed to repeat it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it is one of those where I think that people do have anchor points in their life. Like I speak about it a lot on the podcast, and I've said, you know, my dad passing away, worst thing that's ever happened to me, but it's the best thing that ever happened to my character, and it changed the entire course of my entire life. I wouldn't be with Megan right now if it hadn't been for that. Or statistically, it's just unlikely because I end up dating someone literally because my dad was ill. He did a charity event because he used to be in a band and stuff, got the old band back together, played when he was really ill, which invited my mum's old school friend, and she had 2 daughters, and they tried for me to see one of the daughters, and I ended up seeing the other one. They wanted me to date the one my age. I went for the one who's 5 years older than me. So I dated her for a while. And so it was one of those where, because of dating her and then being with her for a while, then subsequently meeting the next person I dated, then the next person until I got to Megan. Like, the anchor point of my life is that Megan can never meet my dad because the only reason I met her is because of my dad's passing. And that's like an anchor point in my life. And there's certain things that happen to people, like they move to a certain place, or often tragedy, family members pass away, or they get, you know, an animal, or they delve really deep into something like the Star Wars lore. For me delving into that got me into my Star Wars podcast. I've interacted with more people to do with Star Wars like yourself because of my Star Wars podcast, and kind of other things that have splintered off from those. But I do believe there are certain anchor points that kind of make you. And I think that my idea of destiny, fate, or anything controlling, I think that it's what it is I think it might be chaos theory, but it's essentially anything that could happen will happen. Okay. But what my perception of the universe and existence is that in this version of life in the Big Bang is that I'm here speaking with you, Thomas, about X, Y, Z, and then however my life goes until I die, that's it for me. Then the universe ends in God knows how many billions of years, and then it recedes back, and then it starts again. But one thing, just like, or maybe even more than one thing, maybe loads of different things. But like, with DNA can't perfectly replicate itself. Nothing in nature is a perfect duplicate. That's the one key thing, which is how evolution happens. That's how, like, basically the entire of existence happens, is because you can't do a perfect copy. As soon as you start doing that, you just copy it over and over and over again. And eventually it makes differences. And then they splinter off over, millions and billions of years. So every time that happens, that creates a new vessel of time and then a new reality, hence another universe. And because when the universe ends, there is no longer any time, and then it recedes and starts again, time doesn't occur again until the universe starts again. So what ends up happening is you just get these, in my mind, almost strips or tunnels of just, this is existence A, B, C. And because there is no time or any concept, they all exist all infinitely. Because every conceivable decision that's ever been made, never could get made, has already been made. It's just where we are is in this one, and then in the next one is when a different one happens, or in a previous one is when one happened. And if I think of them again quite visually in these almost tubes, I think of them almost like those Chinese finger traps, you know, that you get when you're a kid. Just like that is just like the start of the universe and the end of the universe, and all those intricate cables, that's just it. And then the next one is just one bit different. And I just think with that concept, I feel like it's not necessarily, you know, again, this is just my own theory, my own kind of thoughts on matters, is less so that when we die, we then get a choice and we get to choose X, Y, Z, is more so that everything already has, and it's almost just kind of either in this universe or we will just experience all of them, is that who's to say there's not just an infinite amount of experiences that Thomas Rochester does, and you will just go through all of them. And there is such an infinite amount that you can never theoretically do them all. But also, you will already have done them because time is only a concept in this timeline. So it becomes this infinite times infinite mathematical problem. And that's kind of how I view the ideas of parallel universes as well, and destiny and all that stuff, is like maybe deja vu or prophetic dreams, because I've had them, to be honest with you. And, you know, I don't necessarily subscribe to psychic abilities and soothsayers and people being able to predict the future or anything like that. But, you know, memories are made of electricity. Who's to say that you can't read someone's mind in theory if your brain got the electrical energy that they are sending out? And in theory, if you could do that, how could that concept be, you know, developed upon? But like with the idea of seeing things ahead, I wouldn't believe it if I'd heard anyone say, I have dreams of stuff that happens in the future. I wouldn't believe it, because I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because you can't. But I have. And it's nothing of excitement or interest. I never saw anything of my dad being ill or anything like that. It was really, really benign stuff. And I get it like once a year, maybe sometimes a bit more frequently, but generally it's like once a year. Well, I'll just dream something that's really boring and benign. And I'll just think, oh, that was a weird, you know, those weird dreams you get where it's basically like reality, but it's not. And then you wake up from it, you're like, I have to kind of forget what happened in that dream, because that has no relevance to my life. You know, and then years later it will happen. And it's just like, there was one I remember when I was like 8 years old or 9, and the dream was me just laying down and looking up, and 3 or 4 people's heads coming over me and going, you're right. And then there was one specific thing they said, and I can't remember what it was, but it was something that you wouldn't normally say unless you're in that specific situation. It was an open evening thing for school. And so that happened, and I was like, oh, that's weird. I've never seen those people before. They said something weird to me. That was a weird 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Oh, well, forget. And then when I was 14, I think, ish, I did an open evening with my secondary school, and I had my group of friends who were those people that I hadn't seen before. And I remember laying on a table while we were waiting, because we were done 15 minutes early before the parents started coming and looking at the school and stuff. So I just laid on a table and just looked up, and then they peered over me and said those things. And I was like, and then before my friend said the second thing he said, I knew exactly what he was going to say. And I looked at him and I was like, what the fuck? And then once I kind of realized that's when the memory of the kind of thing stopped. And some people say it's deja vu or whatever, but I've experienced deja vu where feeling like something's the same. But I find that with those dreams, they're such short snippets. By the time I realize when I'm like, wait, I've seen this before, to even say the thing that's going to happen next, it will have already happened. And I've had that quite a few times on lots of little random, really inconsequential things. So even with that concept where I'm like, my science mind is saying that doesn't work, but I have literally experienced that, which might make the sense of where the parallel universe tube thing is, that you can just see in this timeline, you can just see a smidge ahead of that in some way. Or if it's like an echo that's happened so many times, it's just almost like a cookie for your brain. You've just been in this situation so many times. There's kind of almost a residue thing left there. But that's my kind of thoughts and concepts on prophetic dreams and forward thinking and stuff. Parallel universes, all wrapped in one.
All wrapped in one. Yeah, that was a lot. Because, see, that's nice. Sometimes it's nice. Mine are like slightly compartmentalized. the parallel universes thing, I'm not even gonna touch. I have nothing but theories, but none of them are concrete. They're all fluid. They are just as fluid as time itself. I do believe in other dimensions, I think is a good way to put it. There's a theory of the inverse reality from time space, which we live in, to space, or excuse me, space time that we live in, to time space. I think I mentioned about it a little bit on the Star Wars pod for the Ahsoka episode. Like we traversed space at a rate of time here and there. You traverse time at a rate of space. So you take 3 steps east, you travel X amount of time forward. You take 3 steps west, you travel X amount of times backwards, etc. Go north and south, it puts you on different timelines, possibly different universes, alternate realities, or deviant paths of the time. If you're a big fan of Loki, a branch time, excuse me, where fucking A, man, we're basically talking about Loki at this point.
I love Loki, to clarify. My favorite Marvel show.
Yeah, we're living Loki. Living la vida Loki. So when it comes to, I'm just going to talk about the prophetic dreams and like the thought pattern. There's a theory that it's one of those chicken or the egg things. Did I have the dream of the future, or in the future did I send that message back to the past? Right? That's one of those things that I've always enjoyed. It's like an evolutionary thing. But my first memory, I've had 2. One of my first memories growing up was watching my grandfather drive parallel with my dad and I on a separate road, but we could see, like, it's one of those neighborhood situations. And I'm like, oh, that's granddad. My dad's like, yeah. And there's a point where I'm like, I don't honestly remember if I had deja vu in that moment. Sometimes I feel like I did. But there is one where we were watching Unsolved Mysteries. I was about 3 years old. We're laying, and I don't remember what episode it was. I'm sure if I saw it today, I'd be like, that was it. I feel like there was something to do with not frying pan. Was it Unsolved Mysteries? Because it was 911 and then Unsolved Mysteries. They'd come on back to back. Rescue 911, excuse me. And whatever it was, I remember going, oh yeah, we watched this. And my mom's like, no, this is a brand new episode. Like, no, this, and this happens. It was Rescue 911 because it was one of those grease frying accidents that happened, and the child got hurt and it's panicky. And I tell my mom about it and she's like, no. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen this. And in my mind, I've seen it in 3 different viewpoints. My body, from my eyeballs, but I'm also watching myself lay on the ground from the angle of the door, almost as if I were my grandfather, right? And then from outside of that perspective, seeing every single body there, like I'm watching that happen through a TV. And the reason I bring this one up more than the others, because the other ones are fun, but it's the chicken or the egg situation. And I've also had really awesome dreams before too, like that you just don't expect to happen. But I've also had horrible dreams, like, oh, someone OD'd that I know, and then 2 days later, the person who OD'd in my dream tells me about someone else who OD'd that I know, and I'm like, oh fuck, like there it is. Or when I was like a teenager, I was standing in front of 3 brick buildings, and they were about 5 to 7 stories tall. And I'm just like, wow, like that's Bay Medical Center. Like in my mind, I'm like, that represents Bay Medical Center where I was born. And I was like, this building represents, I don't know, some other high-rise building that for the life of me, I don't know where I'd seen it. And then I go to the third one and I'm like, I don't know what that represents. And I get really trashed one night when I'm 20 years old. It was on my 20th birthday, to be fair. And I'm sitting in the parking lot and my buddy's checking on me. And I don't remember. I was like, I'm so hot. He's like, dude, it's 60 degrees out. I'm like, I'm so hot. Take my shirt off, lean against the car. And I look up and I go, holy shit. And he goes, what? I stand up and I recognize I'm in the parking lot of my dorm in college. And if I did not go to this school, like it's a huge one of those points. If I didn't go to this college, I would not be the man I was today. And I'm looking up and I go, I dreamt about these 3 buildings when I was 15 years old. And in my dreams, and I labeled them all, everything I just said. And dude's like, huh, that's weird. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, down to the point where I started having deja vu. And I was like, oh, hold on. Where's the car? And a car drives by. And I was like, that the person lives on, and I just called out where they lived because I'm like, yeah, I know who that is. And I had never seen them in the car before. It was one of those weird ass things. But the 3-year-old situation I bring up specifically, we got back. Everything's cyclical. There's in that book, Journey of Souls, they talk about the afterlife. You know, step 1, when you die, you exit the body and you're not really aware that you've died unless you're used to it. And you're like, oh, I died. And you see your family sad and you're trying to tell them it's okay. Like, I'm alive. I'm still alive. Like, you'll see me soon type thing. Or, you know, depends on if it was a traumatic death, then the soul panics, right? The soul is very, very connected to the body. And sometimes that severance is painful, as some of my past life dreams have been. So the next stage is like you get sucked through a tube. Have you seen the movie Soul?
No.
By Pixar?
Oh, yes. No, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Where they have that big tube to jump into like Earth. That's actually from the book that I read. And I'd heard about it. I watched the movie and I'm pointing out all these things that are like referenced in this book in a way, or I guess they're pulling reference from, because the book that I read, Journey of Souls, I learned about it in a different book, Synchronicity Key. And I just recently went through Journey of Souls. So I knew about it for a while. And this book, I think, was written in the first time in like the 80s or 90s. So it's been around for a long time. You go through various stages of the afterlife, one of which is like a counseling and therapy for the soul. I've had dreams of that. I've had dreams of the entire afterlife, actually. I had a dream of the entire afterlife stage to the point where like I'm getting ready to go back to Earth and I'm seeing all the people that I'm going to see and like I love. I'm like, oh my God. And they're like celebrating me going back. Oh, like we're so excited. We can't wait to see you again. Like it's going to be so much fun. And I come to a point and I'm like, wait, what's happening? Because I wasn't really clear. It's like, we got to send you back. I was like, wait, why? I don't want to go back. Like, I don't want to go back. And it's like, it's okay. We'll see you soon. And shout out, He Who Remains really fast. And then I turn around and it's crazy. Like I turn around and I mean, I'm talking Japan. I feel like I've seen it somewhere, but you got 2 mountains right next to each other looking beautiful and a Japanese architecture building. And I'm like, wow, that's beautiful. And I wake up and I'm like, what the hell? At some point during the night, I would wake up and start jotting down. I started doing dream journals when I was in 2018.
I did dream journals when I was in college.
Yeah?
Funny enough, about 14 years ago. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I've got some as well.
Love it. Yeah, dude, that was when I really started like comprehending what was happening in dreams a lot more and like finding my meaning and message and looking for symbolism. I don't always remember my dreams enough to write them down when I first wake up. And sadly, I feel like I'm way too busy to be doing that as of late.
It takes ages when you want to write down a dream. Like I had a little notepad, an A5 notepad, so only like half the size of a normal bit of paper. And I would write on that and I'd probably get, a short dream would be just 2 pages of that, but that would still take like quite a while to write it. But I remember having a few dreams which were quite long, full big A4 size pieces of paper and double-sided. Like I think one of them was like 9 or 8 double-sided. So it was like handwriting nearly 20 pages. I've still got it somewhere of a nightmare where it was like a cockroach. It was basically like Hopper from Bug's Life, but like giant going after me. Yeah. And it was like this whole thing that lasted ages, and I was writing dreams then because certain nightmares kept happening, so I wrote them down, and normally writing down recurring dreams can get rid of them. So I used that tactic and wrote down my nightmare dreams, and it helped. So sorry, writing down dreams takes forever. I've often thought I'd like to write them down, but it takes, especially if you want to write in decent detail, and also when you forget the dream, like when you reread it, you want to be able to visualize kind of what you did remember and not have a vision, because sometimes you remember a memory or maybe remember a dream and details change a bit. I do it with movies or actors where I'm like, a certain feature of an actor is more prominent, and then in my memory I think how they look, and then I see them, I'm like, oh, I thought that, if someone's got like a really big eyebrows or something, and I just in my head they've got bigger eyebrows than they really do, little things like that. So I think that writing them down can really, really help. But sorry, you and your dream journals, did you have a dream dictionary as well? Did you look up stuff to do with like the meanings of the dreams? Because I went through that phase. I've got a dream dictionary somewhere where I'd like read through
a whole dictionary. No, I just Google it, and I would type it out in my phone.
I suppose yours was a few years ago. Mine was over a decade ago.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so like I would wake up in the middle of the night and like I would start to. I have great muscle memory with my fingers, so like I can close my eyes and type on my phone, and autocorrect helps a lot. I'm not saying I'm a god with the finger types, but it's very helpful. So getting back to the afterlife, to the specific stage that I'm talking about, it's called life selection. And it's like you go into this big circle, like you're there, and it's like, oh, I'm like in a room, and there's like it's like a bunch of screens are surrounding me, or one big scene. It's like a loop of possibility, similar to the sacred timeline. And in it, you can like see the various views, like the various lives that your soul can choose to go to learn the lessons that you need to learn. And it's given to you. It's like here are the selections that you have based on what you're wanting to do. You've talked with your guide and what the people above you know about you. And everything in there is communicated via like thought. No one speaks. There's no mouths, nothing like that. But you can sense like, oh, this person is that person. And I always like view them in this gender and vice versa, because that's how they always present themselves and stuff like that. So it's really interesting how the mind, like the quote unquote mental energy of the soul is so powerful in the spirit world. And then you'll look at the lives, and I just listened to it, so I wasn't aware of this, but like basically you're watching on a TV screen, you're in a chair, you have a fast forward, a play, a stop, a rewind, and you can kind of see certain moments. Like you can scan the life and see certain moments, and then you can go into it and you can fly around. Essentially, like as the soul, you can fly into the scene and kind of view and see people, hear people. You can go into the viewpoint of other people, which was crazy to me hearing about in the book. I was like, whoa. And so that 3 viewpoints of something, right? My viewpoint, which I remember having. I remember this looking at my mom going, oh, I've seen this one. And it's like, no, it's a brand new episode. Then the viewpoint from my from the back room, or the watching over everyone, would definitely have been my grandfather, because he would come in. He had a different place he'd watch TV, because good old people born in the 30s would do stuff like that. And so he would come in and watch sometimes and then walk away. I mean, I do this exact same thing here and there. I'll walk in, like, what you watching? Dope. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my cave. And so it's like, oh, did I share the same soul with my grandfather, or did I just hop into his eyes and viewpoint and see how much he felt and loved and hear the emotions and comprehend his experience in this time, in this reality, and this space? And like, that's the way that souls choose bodies. And then they also will like pre-plan certain things. One of the things that I always sticks out to me is one person was a Viking, peak physical specimen, and they live to fight and fuck, essentially. That's literally what she said. Is like, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be in peak physical condition, and I wanted to know what it was like to be one of the most powerful humans on earth. It's like, well, what other choices did you have? Well, it was this Viking or being a Greek soldier. I'm like, well, why didn't you do the Greek soldier? Well, I didn't really want to be chained up to the politics of not having control of where I go and who I see and all of that. Like, I wanted freedom, and being a Viking offered me more, quote unquote, freedom from all of that, all of the trappings of society. And in the 1800s, I believe, she saw, and this is the part that gets super trippy. Like, she saw a point where the girl was jiggling on a cage or whatever, and the soul knew that it needed to go through some trauma. And I need to re-listen to it because it's not as fresh right now, so I could make the story wrong. It's jiggling on the lock. Her mom says not to, and she keeps doing it, and eventually the door opens of the carriage. She falls out, and when she falls, the wheels go over her femurs, breaking them. because it's so old in time, she can never really walk again without major assistance and crutches. So that makes her be less physically adept and allows her to grow her mind and ends up being like a writer, a famous writer, but with a pseudonym because she's a woman back in the day. And so helped teach others and expand her intellectual growth and knowledge that helps the spirit as well. So they're talking about it, and it's like, did you choose to do that? Did you force that girl's legs to be broken? Or was she already, she's like, well, I saw the opportunity. She was jiggling on it, and I could have stopped her and saved her, or continued on with it and went, and we made an agreement. Like, and that's how it was described. Like the body and the soul made the agreement. So if you ever have something where you're doing something and you hear a thought like, maybe I shouldn't do this, it's probably your soul talking to you saying, hey, we don't want to do this. This isn't the time. And then you could choose, because that's the key thing is like the soul. That's the fucking awesome thing I love about this Destiny is it's written, but it's not. Like it is exactly as chaotic as it could be, because the soul is like, I could have nudged her further away from doing it and made her stop and made her listen. And she might have chosen that on her own if I didn't lean into, we need to do this. And so if you've ever had something happen physically to you where all of a sudden you're in a different state of consciousness, I've had plenty of concussions. Almost every single time I'm able to call out what people are going to say. I had one time in a football game where I was like, don't ask me if I am okay. I'm going to be fine. Like, how'd you know I was going to ask you? I was like, well, first off, I have a concussion. Any sane person would ask me that. Second off, you were 3 seconds away from doing it. I've been here before. No, I'm not going to go to a doctor. Yes, we should continue playing. And no, he's not going to throw the ball. And like, I just started calling shit out. And people were like, what the fuck? And I was like, listen, guys, I've had plenty of concussions. I can tell you right now, I get a little bit prophetic with shit happening. And I was like, and I'm at a point where I'm in a lot of pain. And I think today is Friday. And I was like, and because I don't know if it's Friday, that's how I know I'm really calling out the little moments, because that's a microscopic thing that you can't keep track of. But I don't know how to describe it. I feel like when I get hit in the head to a certain degree, I can keep track of such minute little details that like I have this little precognition of being able to read thoughts, because my thoughts are fucking scramble brains. Whereas I couldn't tell you what day it is, because that's trivial as fuck. What is time? And then I have, like when you get a major injury, it almost stamps into you. There is a specific level of pain that my body will get to, and it happens a lot. And I have a lot of key memories dating back to early childhood. Allegedly, I broke my neck at birth. There's no way to really find that out. The story of my birth was that the doctor kept telling my mom she wasn't dilated enough for me to come out. If anyone knows me, I don't give a fuck what the doctor says. I'm going to do it anyway. So I legitimately, not to get gross, she had to have so many stitches because I just was like, hey, surprise, motherfucker. To the point that the doctor had just got his gloves on, turned around and went, oh shit, and caught me. That is the story of my birth. So there's a likelihood that I jammed my neck, and what I've been told is that I didn't get enough nurturing from my family, because love heals, right? On a metaphysical level, love heals. And because a baby's joints aren't fully developed and the bones aren't full on yet at that point at birth, that I should have healed with love and nurturing, but I didn't get that. And so my skull deformed. I was left alone to cry a lot, which is a fact. I never slept, probably from the trauma. And so like I have memories from really early on in life. And every time I've been told about the story of my birth, I'm like, I feel like I was there. And I can, not in a joking way, but like I have energetic feelings. Like Leia, there's a canon issue of like, I remember a face, a feeling more than anything. And people are like, how? How can she remember that? She was a baby. Dude, this is how. Like, the energy that an infant absorbs, that's all they're absorbing. Energy, information. That is what happens as soon as you pop out of the womb. And there are cases that the baby knows more inside the womb than we could ever fathom. Especially leading up to the moments of birth. And, it's the baby kind of can choose when to come out in a theory way, in a metaphysical thing that I don't have enough evidence to dive into. We'll call it my feeling. So the body will always keep score, and the body is key to getting our soul through different things. I'm pretty sure there are specific injuries that were demanded that I have to happen. To the point that I'm doing a football drill, American, 15 years old, and I'm like, hey, I was like, I shouldn't be doing this drill. I don't think this makes logical sense. I was like, why am I going to have to run the ball? I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. You're putting a ball in my hand and wanting me to be a running back. If you want someone to make him have to earn this tackle and this drill, someone who's ever been a running back, just let me block. Dude's like, oh, man, don't be a bitch. Essentially, rub dirt on it. Sure fucking enough. Separate my shoulder. It happened one time. Got hit. Ball landed on my ribs, shoved my ribs over just a little bit. My dad said I've always had this little notch in my ribs. I debate that on a lot. I debate it all the time. And then there's a bulge in my sternum basically because I feel like it jammed super hard. Separated my shoulder, which led to years of degradation in the joint. Apparently, I tore my labrum at some point in my right shoulder from that injury or later on. And it had healed with massive scar tissue. That was like a precognition, like something bad is about to happen. Did I manifest that, or was it meant to be? That eventually led to the start of me no longer playing football because I just couldn't keep up physically anymore. The concussions didn't help either. My left shoulder, though, is during fight choreography, working at a Ren fair. Everything was going fine. There was nothing wrong. I had no idea it was coming. Take a fall. And here's the thing. I'd been told, I've watched wrestling, pro wrestling. I have a habit to slap the mat, basically, when I go down. And I'm taking a fall that you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to basically hit the ass and roll back and then let your feet come back so it looks more aggressive. I was tired. They asked if we could do it one more time. I was like, one more time, and then I need a break. I was like, I got one more in me, and then I need a break. I knew I needed a break right then, but I was being a stubborn shithead. These factors lead up. I take the fall. I go to slap the mat. I go down too fast, catch my left elbow on it, pop my my shoulder all the way out, and I'm like, oh God, I'm in trouble. That hurt a lot. Okay, that'll be fine. It's separated a little bit. We'll be fine. Put my left hand on the ground and put all the force in my hand to push it off, and I got nothing. No pain, no anything. And I look over, and by this point, as soon as I hit the ground, time was no longer real. I had millions of thoughts, fight or flight response. I was ready to fight. I knew I was in pain, and I was going to finish. Once I put my hand on the ground, I realized, holy, I'm in a lot of trouble. From that point, I'm like, I know what I have to do to finish this fight, and then we'll go from there. I basically swivel my hips to get me back up, finish the fight with one hand. My arm is dangling by my side, but no one really notices. At least that day I was. Grab the sword, hold. And my partner's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, why? She's like, I heard a pop. And I'm like, oh. Yeah, I think I dislocated my shoulder. Popped it back in. She goes, oh my God. And I was like, the show is going to have to go on. If I'm hurt, fuck it. I'm hurt, but don't tell anyone. And we do it a couple more times, and my arm is bad. I'd already had surgery. And if I did not have that happen, I would have never had my shoulder surgery, which would have never challenged my work on my mental health, which by that point, I'd been out of therapy for a while. And you're talking about anchor points, this is a guaranteed anchor point because I'd been doing well. I wasn't back into therapy yet, I don't believe. No, I wasn't, because it was after surgery when I was at a I don't give a fuck about being alive state. We did that. 3 months later, I had to have surgery because it had degraded to a point that I couldn't keep it in socket no matter what my muscles did. It was 50%, over 50% hanging off the bone, and they had to stretch it back and reattach. And that put me into a depressive state because I had surgery. I couldn't use my arm. I had a lot of good things going on, but it was like, if that didn't happen, I don't know if I get back into therapy as fast as I did. If I didn't do that, then I don't think that I start growing and dealing with my early childhood trauma that nobody knew about. And from there, I wouldn't have grown and gotten deeper and deeper and deeper into the spiritual level because I was already kind of deep. But once I had that, I had nothing but time. So I would read more. I would meditate more. When I was in pain, I would literally just lay down on my back and breathe because I knew that breathing will release the pain. And that got me to a point where now, it also took me out of physical activity, which is the big key of that injury, similar to the lady who had her legs. So that's one of those things where I'm like, I had to have that happen. That was chosen. My soul understood it was happening, and it could have pushed me to say, hey, don't do it. Don't take one more. But even looking back, I was like, I'm tired, but I can do one more. Like, full confidence, no issue. And there's other times where I've had, I was like, I don't know if I should do one more. I was like, give me a second. I was just like, no, let's start right now. And gung ho right on into it. Had done the fight hundreds of times by this point. Separated, took the shoulder out, popped it back in, and I did it hundreds of times after that point. And in the book, the lady is like, yeah, sometimes you have to balance the karma. And she's like, so I chose a weak body because I'd always had a strong physical body, but I never focused on intellect or emotions. So that helped me balance the scales of that journey. And I don't know how the hell we got here. Oh yeah, past lives and dreams and all that good shit. And so that is like my view on destiny. There are anchor points, and how you get between those anchor points is where the free will comes in, because the soul can only do so much. God can only do so much. We have to make the choice on the planet in the same way that, your parents can only do so much. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't teach it to drink. If you teach you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. You teach him to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. It's one of those what came first type of things. Did the injury happen because it was destined, or did the injury happen because you chose? And it's one of those, it's my favorite thing about life, man. There's no true deep answer.
Yeah, it's interesting with free will, because one of the ideas is there's ways you can kind of, what's the term, rationalize how one feels about things. My love of Star Wars, rationally, it's because it's an interconnected universe, so I can read all these different bits of content, they all connect together. It was a connection to my dad because he passed away before the sequel trilogy was announced, and I have fond memories connected with him. And also it's got the nostalgia element of something I quite liked when I was a kid. I've always enjoyed sci-fi, and a lot of the books and novels and video games are incredible. Obviously I love the films and series as well, but there's a lot of great content in certain ways. So there's a great way to rationalize that, but you can also go, yeah, or it's just a connection to the dad, and it's like, fair, that could be a reason. Or you could say, well, my destiny, in air quotes, what my soul is driven to do is to do this podcast, to speak with you and other individuals I've spoken to do with Star Wars, and that's put me on a certain trajectory of something else. Like, one of the things I found about podcasting is the best things for me out of podcasting are not the things I thought I would get from doing it. Like, I just needed a creative outlet. I just needed, I used to have a YouTube show. I used to make music videos for bands. Like, I've always had something. And so for a period of time, I started writing like a book as well, like a guide to life in air quotes, because a 17-year-old or 17 to 22-year-old knows how to live your life, clearly. But like, I started doing these creative outlets and things. But then with podcasting, the thing that I found that is the most valuable is the people I've met. And, the conversations I have are great. But the people I've met, as because of the conversations I have, because of my desire to have these conversations, because of my love of Star Wars, to have Star Wars adjacent conversations, it's made me meet people. And a lot of my podcasting friends I would class as some of my best friends in the world. Like, and I would never thought I would make those friends from podcasting. And so what made me love Star Wars, what made me get into podcasting, I've described it as the pull, and many people have many different words. There's intuition for it, there's a gut feeling. Like, since Dad passing away especially, I've really tried to focus just kind of my gut to kind of go live, what if I stand still, what is that gentle breeze, where is it pushing me? Like, where am I? And I'm qualified to do sailing as well, so it's quite a good metaphor. I spent 4 years sailing, so I can rig up a small sailboat, a dinghy or pico, a catamaran, the ones with the 2 blades. I can rig one of those up and sail one, things like that. Like, I love to sail, I love water. I say I love to sail. I haven't sailed in many years because it's quite an expensive thing to keep up, and I don't own a boat. But that the kind of going with the wind thing is what made me want to do podcasting is the pull. I just had this feeling that I kind of wanted to when people would talk about it and etc. And something just drew me to it. And it's like, well, I can think that's free will. I can think that's, there's the nature versus nurture, conversation, which is like everything up to my point. If you could somehow mathematically work it out, it would have driven me to this point and this point and this point. You can almost predict someone's life almost in that way, in theory. But it's just one of those things that I kind of think imagination in itself. Some of the greatest songs ever written, as an easy example, was just one individual who wrote a song and made it incredible. There's so many countless individuals, like Presley comes to mind and things like that. There's loads of others. But like, what made them write the song? When you write a song, you just get, nowadays, obviously, because there's so much other music, you can think maybe it's influence, but back when you go back far enough, when there wasn't even that much influence, even if you go to like classic composers, or even people who created music, like all these, how far you want to go, what is the thing that's making you think that? What pressure is on the human brain that's making you do that? And I think the theory of the pineal gland connecting with something else is like, is there an antenna in your brain? Like, that would explain how certain people can just, I've said things before with Megan where I think couples do this quite a lot when you spend a lot of time with someone in close proximity, and twins do it and other family members, where it's like Megan will just be thinking something and I'll know exactly what she said. And she will attest to this. No, none of this, I think I'm psychic or anything, but like she legitimately has been like, before she's just said, guess what I'm thinking? And I'll just be like this. And once it was just dogs in blankets, but this was very early on in our relationships. It was doggy in a bike in a blanket or something, like a dog in the front basket of a bike with a blanket over it. And it was just completely innocuous. And I was just like that, really specific. And we weren't talking about anything close to that at all. And we never mentioned it prior. She was like, how the hell did you know that? That's exactly what it was. And little threads of that happening. And I'm like, what the brain is capable of and what it connects to is just such a peculiar thing. The fact that, 2 humans can basically, and this works with all animals, can get together and basically put parts of themselves in the other and then make a person who's able to have coherent thought and be able to have all these things and conceptualize, like, how will they not be connected to their parents? They're literally made from the same stuff. How would they not be connected? Well, they would be in certain ways. Okay, but we're all made from the same stuff. So surely we're all connected to some degree. And then you look at like the tree of life and like how connected we are with like bananas and like other animals and other things and like where it all kind of stems from. And it's like, it's even on the kind of, as we start to wrap up, like the scientific mind of me, whenever I latch onto these ideas, like I've got theories about ghosts links in with the, I don't believe in ghosts necessarily, but energy is always transferred. It's like, well, in theory, that's a possibility then, because energy can, it's all these little threads that when I look at in a scientific lens and I try to rein it back from a spiritual element and something I think people describe as like, it's hand wavy or it's a bit hippie or anything like that. It's a bit, I can't think of the exact term they use, but it's like derogatory terms to say spirituality, nonsense, that kind of thing. And it's like
woo-woo.
Woo-hoo, that's it, woo-woo.
Yeah.
And it's like, when people think of that, I'm like, I try and look at it, if I go down a rabbit hole, I try and bring it back from a scientific perspective. And a lot of the time, you can with simple scientific rules. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's where I started, the source field investigation. The writer, David Wilcock, I will give him credit for that book. It's very good. It's a research novel. Then The Synchronicity Key is also a research novel, but boy, there's a lot more of his personal ideals and ideas shoved into that one. It's got great stuff in there, but it's like, this is happening, that's happening, this is happening, that's happening. I'm telling you, this is the truth. And it's like, that's is what we like to call a projection, because I don't actually agree with what you're saying. But the source field investigation is very scientifically based. The energy connection thing found out from a polygraph. And then there's so many other little things kind of spread throughout in the fact that like life on other planets exists because there are frozen bacteria in space dust or something like that, I think is what he mentions in the book, that has been proven. So if that lands on our planet, that's a bacteria that'll change the entire environment, or lands on another planet, could spawn an entire new species. So like there's a lot of science based in all that. And when it comes to, the brainwaves of it all, that's, a lot of in America, my crew is always like, man, I just need someone to like read my energy and like my vibes. And like, especially when I don't know what I'm trying to say, it's like, that's when I need someone the most to just like feel what I'm saying. And I'm like, no, I will be very honest. There's a lot of people who are like, I don't want to have to express my boundaries. I just kind of want someone to understand my boundaries. And I'm like, listen, as a kid with Tourette's, I'm really good at energy. But if you're trying to have a boundary, darling, you gotta fucking man up and say it. Just say it. I will understand it and I'll respect it. It'll be easier to respect if I know it's like consent. I don't know if you're wanting this or not. Just use your words, please. So that's kind of how I approach in general life itself. Like, can't tell you how much it gets me in trouble. I used to trust my gut all the time. And then it got to a point where I was like, oh, whoa, I don't know. Like, then I started questioning myself. I started fearing it. And I really started fearing it around the time of my shoulder surgery. So I've been going through a really dark transformational, we'll go with that word, period, after my shoulder surgery, which would have been 2018. So like 26, 27 years old. And so like it was a lot. I went through a lot physically, emotionally, had to rebuild my strength in my left arm. I mean, I still have problems with it now, especially up like in nerves in my neck. I can't extend my fingers all the way when I extend my arm. There's little things, right? And when it comes to, where was I going? Brainwaves, reading signals. So the ability for us to perceive the vibrational frequencies of another person or an animal or the wind, that is, I think, what the Force and what superpowers come from. Your ability to understand, your ability to accurately interpret the vibrations that you're feeling. Little anecdote, Hurricane Michael in Panama City, Florida, it was a Category 5. It wiped out an entire town, wiped it right off the face of the earth, except for, I think, 5 or 6 buildings. And it wiped out almost every tree east of our bridge. So Panama City Beach is beautiful. Everyone's like, oh, it's so nice here. Yeah. Well, they didn't help us rebuild after. So there's a little bit of a snobbiness on that side of the bridge from the politics specifically. So fuck politics. There was no power for a long time. I went back 2 days after it happened to help my dad kind of clean up. And once he shut the generator off, it was weird. I don't know how to describe it. It was weird. When I got into town, there's always been a darkness in Panama City. Also found out it could be because we mowed down a bunch of like Indian grave mounds back in like the late 1800s when people moved in here. I don't know. Just found that out. Going to research that because that'd be a great horror movie. But there's always been this like weird dark energy of anger in the town. I've always theorized because we're an hour away from the time zone change. So, especially in the winter, it gets dark at 4:00 in the afternoon here because, which sucks because it's like 5:30 on the East Coast. And because it's on the East Coast coming off the water, it gets light earlier over there. You get daylight a little earlier, so you kind of get that radiation energy. And then over here, it's why they call it seasonal depression. I mean, there's just a darkness of lots of drug use and stuff like that. It's traumatic at times for a lot of people here. And coming back, I was like, "Ooh, I don't know about this." And then I like walk outside and I'm just like, there's nothing but fear and sadness in this entire area. And I was like, all the trees were dead. And it's like I was feeling their pain. Like they were snapped in half, bent over, cars were crushed, houses were destroyed. People were in terror because it was 2 days after this entire. A lot of people stayed. They didn't know it was going to be a Cat 5. It was a Cat 3 the day before. My dad woke up at 2 or 3 in the morning, saw it was a Cat 5 or it was becoming a Cat 4. And he's like, oh, God, it's going to hit us directly as a Cat 4, maybe a Cat 5. So he woke up his girlfriend and they got the fuck out of town. I had some family, my mom and my sister, stayed. They were asleep. They didn't get his phone call at that time. They slept until pretty much landfall. And then they rode out a massive storm that went through it dropped barely any rain. It was basically a 5-mile wide tornado moving at about 12 miles an hour, which is honestly, or maybe it was 5. It was pretty fast overall, but the amount of damage it could do in that time and that spread was insanity. So the whole county was basically destroyed from a massive tornado that went really slowly. And the trauma that people had to go through, the PTSD is super fucking real now. And there's a lot of people who like, they're like, nothing gets me, right? And then I see them just break one day and like, oh, I'm fucking wrong. And I was like, dude, did you stay during Hurricane Michael? And they're like, yeah. I was like, that's why. I'm like, dude, it's okay to be stressed. It's okay to have fear. Fear sometimes is healthy because it reminds you you're alive. And I could feel all of that. My dad shuts off the generator and then I feel an absence, like an emptiness inside of me. It's because I've never been around a place that didn't have electricity for longer. Like, and when I say electricity, we go camping in the woods. There are towns. There is electricity. There was living trees. There were dead trees at my dad's house, and there wasn't electricity for, I couldn't even tell you how many miles. Tallahassee didn't have electricity. There were places in Georgia that didn't have electricity. Pretty much my dad was right on the edge of one of the eye walls. So going west for a long time, going east for a long time, north and south, none of it. My dad didn't get electricity for like 30 days because that's how far out of town he lived. So I had one of the worst panic attacks of my life that night because I just couldn't handle the vibrational energetic difference in the world. And that was one of the that was about the time where it solidified into me, like, everything around us is important. And then it started to teach me, like, okay, so maybe that electricity and the understanding is why I can feel the atmosphere change. Like, I'm super sensitive to it, didn't realize it. And then I learned that I have sensory perceptive disorder, which is more about not having spatial awareness at times, but like my hearing is atrociously sensitive. I can hear people. It's like I can feel the wind whisper into my ear that something's happening. I would, like, physically speaking, I'd be sitting at the front desk at a job, and, you know, almost 300 feet away would be down 2 through 3 double doors. A fire alarm goes off, and I'm like, oh, I think the fire alarm's going off. I walk back there and I hit it off. I'm like, how did you hear that? I was like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. And that is it. And that is like a little superpower in and of itself. Speaking of, like, you know, you don't believe in the psychic powers. I have a book that my friend gave me. I read one chapter or one sequence. It's like 25 things to do to kind of build your psychic powers. And the first one is listen to every little thing. Listen to everything. Quiet your mind and try and call out, like, that is a generator humming. That's the sound of a blender. That is the sound of this. Like, and diagnose and categorize like you do when meditating. And it's basically what you're doing, but you're tapping into the sound. Break into, like, categorize all the frequencies. And I started doing that, and that was the last thing I did because one of the things it says is you got to be ready and for the responsibility of these powers, right? Which maybe it's super powerful, but like your ability to hear means you'll probably hear more sensitive information than people will recognize, which then means you have to have a good responsibility to not divulge said information. It's like having what is that thing called? Oh my God. A security clearance in a way is how I view what that statement is you're going to learn shit, and knowledge is power. You can abuse the power or you can cultivate the power, the light side and the dark side. And at that time, I was just not ready. And it was a couple years later, I had that panic attack. And then it's come forward a few years, and I'm like, man, I still struggle. I still struggle in my hometown. I was not a fan here. And the energy of my childhood is chaotic. I was at my dad's house, and we were talking about ghosts earlier, and this popped into my head. When I'm at my dad's house for longer than a visit, I can feel the ghosts of my childhood, which is not to say there were ghosts there and there were dead people and all that. No, more of the
emotional imprint.
The emotional imprint. Thank you. That the heightened emotions and the fear and the stress and the anxiety is laced in every room in that house. And when I go back there, like I went there and I was just angry for like 3.5 days while like dog sitting, and I wasn't doing shit. I had no reason to be angry, but I was angry. Then I'd walk outside and I'd feel better. And I'd leave the house and I'd come back and I'd walk in. I'm instantly angry. And it's like, what the fuck? And I did one of my pineal gland meditations. And I started having visions of like things that would happen in my childhood, but like on a different level than a memory. It was more of like, I don't know how to explain it. It was like I could see the vibration at the moment. So like there's a specific corner that I go to walk around, and even as an adult, and looks totally different now. It's like I had that instant memory, like my sister jumped around this corner in a scary mask when I was 6 and freaked me out and traumatized me. Oh, she shoved me down into that closet and locked me in there and told me there were snakes in there. Like, she really fucked with me. So like all these little things. And I don't know if ghosts in the way that everyone believes in, or everyone like talks about them, exist, but the emotional imprint is what I look at ghosts, all ghosts, every being that they talk about. I think that's what that is. And then, man, to get like super weird really fast, you talk about like entities, and the power of the brain and how powerful it really is. Tulpas. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like Mothman. People dreamed of Mothman and made this character up, right. And then all of a sudden they're seeing it, like they manifest it into a reality, which is like bombastic. And that's another one of those chicken or the egg things. Was Mothman real and like imprinted itself into someone's mind so they could then create it and it can branch into our reality? Or does the mind have the ability to create something so strong and so powerful that it's there?
Yeah,
ghosts.
I mean, you've tackled a lot of things there, but we do not have
journey. Holy shit.
Don't have infinite time, and I wish we did. So I have to come back to this because there's more about sort of karma and good and evil we can delve into. I will just comment that with, again, what I like to try and do here is a lot of people listen to this, these kind of discussions, and I want to always give the balanced perspective of, you've got the people who think it's, woo-woo, but also just think about it scientifically in a sense of, with the memories, either past memories of yourself or of like previous lives people have lived, and you kind of tuning into that, thinking it's potentially your own soul that's tuned into that. The thing is, memories at the end of the day, same as emotions to a different degree, but memories are just electrical signals in your brain. There is a way to transfer those. There's a way to connect them. There's a way to tune into those in some ways. The technology as we're going forward with Neuralink, and there's even those things you can put electrodes on people's brains and see what dreams they're having. And you can have like the things where you do the thought, and it's like how the brain sees a thought from like you when you're watching TV, how your brain kind of processes it. Like there's literal stuff that people can all look into and find how like all the electrodes are plugged into brains and what can be seen from that, and like where the technology is going to go from here and all that kind of craziness. So that's a very interesting part. But I will also say, like, Something very simple, baseline that everyone can understand. If all of this is making your head spin, okay? Wi-Fi, wireless internet connection, ignoring even the phone, because that's a whole other thing of satellite, but just think Wi-Fi. You have a router in your house and you can connect it and you can send data via the internet from a box somewhere into your electronic devices. They're in the air. There is something going on in the air, past you, through you, that literally has to get the devices we are speaking on right now is connected. You know, some things are wired connection. Obviously, that's a lot more easy to perceive. But Wi-Fi and things, wireless connection, the energy that is making this information is literally all around us. It's going through the air. So that in itself, if you can believe that Wi-Fi can exist because of the way that the router sends information and the way that the laptop or the tablet or phone receives the information, if you can comprehend that and you can think that is possible, which it is because we're doing it, who's to say that there's not just other ways of transferring that information wirelessly? You have phones now which you can just literally, you don't have to plug it in, you just put it near another phone, it can transfer the data, it's the energy it's got in its battery. There's all kinds of stuff like this. Like, you put that on a biological scale without the confines of just our simple senses to be able to process those. There's so much groupthink, ants often have a hive mind, like all kinds of different things. You can go so deep into that, and I'm just saying the electrical impulses and the memories and past lives, if people are being very skeptical of them, and I'm not saying believe everything, but like even the theory of it can be feasible with the right parameters in place using what we understand about kind of where we are today. So Thomas, thank you so much for sharing all of that information and things, some of the deeply personal experiences you've had. Any final things that you want to say, and also your plugs and any way people can find you? I'll put details in the description, but the floor is yours, good sir, as we begin to wrap this up.
Yeah, I definitely recommend two books. One is very science and the other is hypnosis, which is a science that we don't understand, is how, I mean, it's a science I don't understand, I should say. So some might call it magic. Where I come from, they're one and the same. Shout out Thor. The first book is Source Field Investigations. I've talked about it here. You really want to get into the science of it all. And I'm a very science guy. I was not spiritual. I believed in this ability to spread and share information because of Wi-Fi and wireless signals and all that. I was like, well, radio waves exist, sonar exists, so there's obviously something here. And I always felt like time travel was possible, but it wasn't about speed. It was more about a vibrational frequency, which speed could be argued as getting you to. And some of the stuff I talked about is from there. I think they reference Journey of Souls, but I'm going to recommend that book entirely because that is just a great book to dive into. There's that, and then there's another one after that, which I can't remember what that's called. Destiny of Souls, maybe. Yes, the same author, Dr. Michael Newton.
Cool. Well, I've already written down Source Field Investigations, Journey of Souls, Wim Hof, The Synchronicity Key. So I've written those things down. I think as I continue to plug and continue this train of thought, but if there's anything else you want me to note, I will put in the show notes. So keep on listening if you want to.
So Source Field Investigation and Synchronicity Key are by David Wilcock. That's important to note. And then Dr. Michael Newton is the author and practitioner for the Journey of Souls. And I cannot recommend those more. And then I also would just say, go look up meditations on YouTube and just chill out. That's the best way for me to plug that. It's because the more meditations you do, the more that you focus in, the better you're going to end up. And I'm going to recommend Morning Guided Meditations on YouTube. It's a playlist with 522 videos. So scroll and pick randomly. It's what I do. I like to let the feeling guide me. And it is by Great Meditation, at Great Meditation on YouTube. I use them regularly, and that is those are guided meditations. It's very nice to have. And what I love about guided meditation, especially if you're new, is them talking will take you out of your own thought process, which is very, very good for beginners. My first guided meditation was doing yoga. The very end, we'd sit down and it would guide us through a body scan, And I can't tell you how much a body scan really means to me these days to find losing feeling in my body, really, and just hitting a different vibration. So those are my recommendations. All of them are going to be you're going to take from it what your mind and soul needs. You can find me on the socials at TC Rochester Act. That is TCROCHESTERACT. Sometimes I mostly post about Star Wars on Twitter, and every now and then I drop some dog videos on my Instagram stories. And you can follow some of my acting journey on that as well. And then, of course, Reckless Rebellion, where we talk about all things Star Wars. We're dropping episodes every week. That is on Twitter at Reckless Rebels, RECKLESSREBELS. And sometimes we get into really strong, really good philosophical debates. And if you want to hear me talk as a creator, you definitely go listen there, because I'd pull in a lot of different things into how I interpret Star Wars. Dude, Mike, thanks for having me on, man. This was great. Definitely gonna have to have a part 2. We got to that sentence. Maybe we'll do a different time next time where we're both a little less knackered.
We'll definitely see. Megan has been doing she's with a theatre group at the moment, so on Sundays and Monday nights she's been doing it, but this month, the next few Mondays she's not. So this Monday I was like, we'll see if she's doing it, because if she does it at like 7 till 10. So it just fits right in the middle there. But no pressure at all. It's been absolutely delightful speaking with you. When we spoke the numerous times in Star Wars, you and I always went on tangents and always delved deep. And you and I are both quite enthusiastic. I don't sound it today because of my voice and my cold I'm getting over. But, enthusiasm and just the intrigue into all these different things is just something that, when Tonya put us together, she was like, I think you'll get along well with Thomas. He's a nerd, but there's more to him than that. You guys are kind of like, there's something that I'm sure you guys will have really great conversations. And as soon as we started talking, when we in that first pod together, she was like, I don't even need to be here.
That's
Look
right.
at us now. Look at us now. 2 hours into the pod. We could easily keep going. I've got other notes, but we will stop, because we can't just spend 6 hours tonight talking, podcasting, because I've got work tomorrow as well, and you've got other parts of your life to live other than podcasting. But thank you once again. All links are going to be in the description. I'll put lots of notes about the books that Thomas has mentioned and things. And just thank you again, Thomas, for making the time. And I'll have you on again. At very least, we've got to talk about good and evil and karma and stuff. So that will be at the very least a little tease of where we'll start in the next conversation. But just thank you once again, and thank you for putting out positive vibes and just general awesomeness into the world.
Thank you, man. All love.
All love to you too.